Hey, kia ora koutou whānau. Welcome back to another edition, a power-enabled edition of Big Hairy News. Chewy, good evening to you, sir.
Good evening.
Very good to be back with you. Yes, apologies about last night, but I have to say to you, in case you were unaware what was happening in the Brittenden household, there's a part of Dunedin that I live in, and actually it was quite a fair distance away from my house, but there was a car V power pole, and it knocked out the power for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and maybe even thousands, who knows, of homes in the part of Dunedin I live in. And it was one of those instances, Chewy, where, the power goes off and then like an hour later, the power comes back on. Or they tell you, the power company says to you, oh, yep, power's going to be off today, but it's going to be off for 8 hours because we're doing big work. I don't think I've ever experienced before the power going off in an emergency and then staying off for 9 hours. So we didn't get power back until after 9 o'clock last night. And because of that, obviously, we couldn't do this, and got to a point last night, if you were unaware, that we basically went, well, even if it was to come back on now, we don't have enough time to prep a show because we had no internet, no nothing, can't do anything. So we pulled the plug, and my apologies for that. But it gave me a very interesting evening. I got to be able to cook some mince on the fire. Actually, we cooked the mince, which was left over from the night before. We cooked it we heated it up on the barbecue, because we got one of those side grills with a little flame coming out of it. And then we kept it warm for a few hours on the fire. Put the fire on last night, not because it was cold, but because our fire is a wetback. So it means everybody could have themselves a shower. And that was us serving dinner. We had mince and we had wraps. That was dinner last night because that was pretty easy to do, and I have to go to the fridge too many times. And then through the evening, we were playing Cards by Candlelight, which is the new Christmas series, Cards by Candlelight. That's me playing euchre, getting thrashed thoroughly as we were playing Cards by Candlelight. And the other thing that happened, and look, I'm aware, put JKs up here. Sorry, JK, it's a bit insensitive of me. Gotcha, with you, fair point. But I'm in my studio in my house, and I was working with a client making a podcast that he had a remote person dialing in, and we're about one question into the podcast, power went down. That's never happened either before. So Chewy, it gave me the kind of idea that we can lose power any stage. We could lose it right now, and then you'd be all by yourself. Oh, by yourself. I
had a power cut, I was lost. I'm so dependent on technology. I was like, oh, the power's out. Of course, my computer's not working. Well, I'll go do something else, and I'll go watch some TV.
I really enjoyed it. I really enjoyed just chilling out, doing nothing. Although, what was interesting is how often even though when you're in a power, and look, someone's talked about Napier. I feel like a complete goose talking about it now because 9 hours, but still how dependent you are on power. That even when it's in a power cut, you don't put two and two together. So the number of times someone in the house flicked the kettle switch on, so they just flicked the switch on, and then they were like, And what did I do? I was talking to the client who I had in here doing it. We went upstairs because we were going to go remote and record it remotely and use the USB mic and just hotspot it. And I went upstairs and I was looking at my phone thinking what we should do. And I went, I'll just show him and I'll cast it to my TV. So we just had a power cut, and that was just the initial thought, and then you go. Ugh. So for those people, I mean, I'd love to hear your thoughts. The people who had actually experienced it for 6 days, do you do that the whole 6 days in Napier? Like on day 3, do you kind of go, oh, time for a shower, let's get the hot water? Oh no, what does it keep on going? Because I keep doing it all day, no matter what. So
it's just habit, isn't it?
Yeah, you get kind of caught up in it. And it made yesterday quite relaxing, today unbelievably busy. I want to say as well, if you are a patron, what you have been able to do today is seen a little bit behind the window, because I made a big mistake, which will be getting fixed up later. So if you're a patron, thank you for being a patron right now on our Patreon page. Let's just say thanks to the patrons first of all. Thank you, patrons. We are enjoyed by you, and thank you very, very much. The reason it says your name is there's a space for you. If you want to come and become a patron, you can by heading to patreon.com/big hairy news. But I've been very, very, very busy today doing the podcast that I was supposed to do yesterday, doing an editing thing that I was supposed to do yesterday, and then doing a podcast booking for today, which I was supposed to do. But part of the thing for being a patron is you get early access to things like interviews, that sort of thing. So this is the interview we're going to play tonight. This is an interview we're going to play tonight. And I believe I've put up on this interview the actual interview. I didn't even edit it. Like if I push play, I don't think it's even edited.
Facebook messages
Yeah,
about
let's see.
Donald Trump.
Hi. Now, if you can help me, your surname, do you pronounce Optican?
Smooth. This is very smooth.
Super smooth. But if you want to see that absolute unprofessional bullshit, you need to be a patron. And you better be quick, because after this show is finished, I'll be taking that down and putting up the correct clip. So yeah, we release anything early up onto our Patreon, and if you are a patron, then you can get early access to it. So big news, lots of stuff going on today. In fact, I've got like 5 things we could talk about. I've had to actually kind of pull it back because we just don't have the time. One of the big things, obviously, the biggest news in the world at the moment is Donald Trump. I have located and found a professor from Auckland University. This is the coolest thing, yeah? And if you're following me on TikTok, I've already put a little clip out. Not TikTok, sorry, on Twitter. He used to work in the District of New York DA's office. That's the DA's office.
Wow, okay.
That's charging Donald Trump. Yeah. So I found he's actually a associate professor at Auckland University right now. You just saw a little image of me fucking up the start of the interview. And so he has really good insights into the American system and into Donald Trump. We're going to talk to him about what's happening legally. And we're talking to Robert Patman tonight about the political ramifications of what's happening. So we've got 2 different interviews. They're both pre-records. And one of them is going to be focusing on the legal side of it. The other one's going to be focusing on the political side of it. Then we've also got Jacinda saying, see you later to politics, and the OCR as well. So there's a lot going on. And I think possibly, Chewy, where we should start is Professor Robert Patman. How do you feel about that?
I feel good. I feel good
okay about that. All right. I just have to really figure out how I'm going to play it now, because I don't really know, because I'm a moron. Yeah, what do you think about Jacinda? Well, we're going to pick up on this later on, but whilst I'm finding this, how do you feel about Jacinda going off today? Is it like it feels nothing to you? Is it a sad day? Is it a good day?
Oh, it's an interesting one, right? Because, I mean, I think to all of New Zealand's prime ministers that have been in my memory, she's probably the one that's had the most impact on me. I think she's generally pretty good. There's stuff that I wish that she did different. You know,
Cannabis.
I wish.
Cannabis.
Well, yeah, to be honest,
Yeah.
you know, but I can see her motivation for doing that. She wanted it to be scrupulously fair and not influenced by what her personal position would be on it. It's just, I don't care about that. I care about can you at least acknowledge that the current system is deeply, deeply flawed and prejudiced, and we can do something better with it. You know, the standard has already been set, like say with the flag referendum, with John Key stamping his approval on his chosen option. And yeah, I don't know. I'm kind of okay with that. I wish she had another term. I wish she had stuck around for this election. Maybe she would have won. Maybe she wouldn't have. You know, but I don't blame her for choosing this moment to go. I think history will be enormously kind to her. I think, you know, all of this noise from the people with the brainworms and all of that will just die away. And I think we'll look back in many years' time and go, "Wow, that was the right person in the right job at the right time."
I saw a really interesting headline, and I've just decided we're going to change the order because we're talking about it now. So let's do Jacinda now.
Yeah.
I saw a really interesting headline, and I think it's really appropriate. And there are going to be some tinfoil hat wearers who push back on this, but I believe and I accept that Jacinda was doing her best to be kind in politics. I accept that. And the headline was something along Jacinda's kind politics in an unkind time. In other words, it feels like, and I accept that. And look, there are going to be some people who want to push back thinking about how unkind it was to, separate people based on their vaccine status. I'm just going to continually come back to the death rate. You're not going to get me off that. Yeah, I'm going to
thousands and thousands of Kiwis are alive now.
Yeah, the cases have all equalized across the whole world, but look at the countries like New Zealand and Australia and places that had that harsh isolation. The death rate is exponentially lower. So I don't give a fuck, and I'll fight anybody. Not really. On that, because it was pretty hard for some people. Some people I also believe made it harder on themselves by either choice or by buying into the mis and disinformation. But I think ultimately she will be lauded as one of the greatest prime ministers this country's ever seen because of this. She's basically a wartime prime minister. And look, I mean, we sit on the left. We're not blunt. We don't hide that. So you might just think of our bias. But actually, for the period that John Key went through the Christchurch earthquake, I would have said the same thing. However, there was a lot of other stuff about John Key either side of that, not so good. But for the period of the earthquake,
that faded away pretty quick from memory, though, didn't it?
It did. So let's have a look at Jacinda's going. Here's the TVNZ. Look, I watched most of her valedictory speech because I was recording Robert Patman at the same sort of time, so I caught most of it. I'm not going to play the whole thing. It's 35 minutes. I would advise everyone to go watch it. It's actually really good. It's a really good speech. It's really funny. It's really insightful. It's quite moving. It's actually, however much of it she wrote or got someone to write with her. It's the kind of speech that you could show to your kids and go, this is good public speaking, if nothing else. So this is what our One News reporter
giving
tonight.
A valedictory speech in Parliament. The former Prime Minister bowing out after 15 years in the House, the last 5 as the country's leader. These are live pictures from the debating chamber. Let's listen in.
We decided to use the help of science, but as so many couples experienced, that wasn't straightforward. I'd not long experienced.
She's talking about baby,
leader of the Labour Party,
not being able to conceive.
I thought
so it's
that
quite
I
a moving
found
speech
myself on
overall.
a path that meant I wouldn't be a mother. Rather than process that, I campaigned to become Prime Minister. A rather good distraction as far as they go. Imagine my surprise when a couple of months later I discovered I was pregnant. There is no question I've had incredible support to be the mother I wanted to be, from the office team who tried to get me home for story time, and Neve's Village who were there when I wasn't. But I leave knowing I was the best mother I could be. You can be that person, and you can be here.
A big part of her speech was basically saying she doesn't have as far as she knew, she didn't have the right character or credentials to be where she was. She was talking about she's emotional, she's a crier, she's a hugger, she gave birth, but at the end of it, she wraps up by going, not quite in these words, but if I can do it, then anybody can do it. You can be here too, is what she's saying now. That's what's tying into the speech.
Now, I cannot determine what will define...
Jacinda Ardern there reflecting on life as a politician and a mother. And we'll have more on what Jacinda Ardern had to say shortly. First, though, political editor Jessica Mackay takes a look back at her years in office and speaks to others who have also held the top job.
The Right Honourable Jacinda Ardern.
Stepping up for the final time.
Te whare e tūnei te marae e tā koto ana tēnā koroa.
Jacinda Ardern savouring the moment. She's been speaking in this place for 15 years.
Maiden speeches are a bit like words spoken in a heated argument. Like it or not, they will come back to haunt you.
27 years old.
If I'm honest, I was probably more than a little shocked to be here. A feeling that even after 15 years, never quite left me.
Only 40 others have felt the weight of the job, one of them flying in for her valedictory.
I think we're lucky to have had Jacinda at this particular time in our history. Many of us, I think, are lucky to be alive because she took the decisions that she did.
The pandemic and a massacre defining Jacinda Ardern's leadership.
Their stories and phases remain etched in my mind and likely will forever. That is the responsibility and privilege of the role of Prime Minister.
I think it really catapulted her on the world stage to have a level of recognition that no other Prime Minister has had, maybe never will have from New Zealand.
Simon Bridges was her political sparring partner for years. He says the world lapped up the idea of a fresh, young, dynamic, progressive politician when she first came in.
I think it is a game of two halves. I mean, there's certainly things where, the promise wasn't met. The promise of transformational politics and policies, I think that didn't quite materialise.
She was a rather younger woman than we were when we got the position. And then she had a small child. And so she broke, down new barriers.
The protests at Parliament were a symbol of the turning tide.
Politics globally has just changed now. It's a lot more aggressive, a lot more polarised. Social media makes it so much easier for things to spread that are both true and not true.
Politicians have to ride the tiger. It's all out there. And so how you communicate, particularly on social media, becomes incredibly important.
John Key sharing some advice from the US.
The haters will always hate and the lovers will always love. It's just the nature of the job.
A job she's now officially bowing out of.
And we're joined now by Jess live from inside Parliament. Kia ora, Jess. The speech has just finished, we understand. A valedictory, of course, a rite of passage for anyone stepping out of Parliament, especially a Prime Minister. What has stood out to you?
Yeah, I just heard the loud clapping about 30 seconds ago, signalling the end of Jacinda Ardern's speech and the end of an era. People will start trickling out of the debating chamber. I've just been in there listening to that speech, and the waiata and the songs will continue for Jacinda Ardern. There is the public gallery that is very full with all of the dignitaries that you would expect. There's also an overflow room just to the right of me, and that's where a whole lot of people are watching that speech take place as well. In this speech, she chose to use her time talking about taking the politics out of climate change. We haven't heard her say that before, urging people really to try and get on with things without it being a partisan issue. She also talked about the weight of COVID and dealing with that pandemic, admitting that she didn't always get it right, but saying that her motivations were always around the right thing. She gave special tribute to her deputy for most of her tenure, Grant Robertson, and her close friend. He got pretty emotional today when we talked to him. They talked about their years of friendship, and when she turned to the current Prime Minister, Chris Hipkins, she said that we are in good hands. One thing she did talk about is being tough and hard in this place and needing to toughen up a bit when she came in. She even talked to the Speaker, Trevor Mallard, at the time about that. But then she said, I would rather be criticised for being a hugger than for being heartless. So there was a lot going on in that speech.
She told a story about going to Whakaari White Island. And I think obviously that had happened after Christchurch. And she told a story about how there was, she didn't say ridiculous headlines, but headlines about, she was spending a lot of time getting photo ops, and she saw a headline or something.
I remember that.
Well, she saw a headline or something that said something like, she's going to Whakaari just to get another photo op while she hugged someone. She said she was talking to a emergency responder, and the emergency responder was emotional, and her innate response was to give him a hug, basically, to empathize. And she had this internal dialogue going on in her head about she's going to get criticized either way, and she'd rather be criticized for being a hugger than for being heartless. And so she hugged it. So that was referencing what Jess Much just actually talked about, that she had these moments where she went, am I going to be my authentic self and show the emotions that I would, or am I going to not and I guess do what maybe others would suggest I should do, and she chose to stay with her authentic self. We'll just play this. Has only got about 60 seconds to go. We'll get to the end of this article.
are starting to move out of the debating chamber now. The politicians, they will be moving through here to go into the banquet hall to have a celebration to mark the end of a chapter in New Zealand political history.
Yes, indeed. Tēnā koe, Jess. Thank you very much for that. And Jacinda Ardern's final speech today was full of jokes and cheers, but it was an emotional occasion too, and ended with tears. Here's how she signed off just half an hour ago with a tribute to her colleagues and family.
Now, I cannot determine what will define my time in this place, but I do hope I've demonstrated something else entirely, that you can be anxious, sensitive, kind, and wear your heart on your sleeve. You can be a mother or not. You can be an ex-Mormon or not. You can be a nerd, a crier, a hugger. You can be all of these things. And not only can you be here, you can lead just like me. Nō reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou, tēnā koutou katoa.
And Jacinda Ardern there being honoured by colleagues. She heads now to work on the Christchurch Call and with Prince William's climate initiative.
Yeah, so that's where she's moving to now. The Christchurch Call is a position that she's asked for and taken on board. And let me make this clear before anyone starts criticising her for being on the public teat. It's a non-paid position, and she's working with Prince William's, I guess, climate change issues. Now, one user stolen my thunder a little bit because this is from the live speech. This is the bit that I wanted to highlight. It's actually the bit they've just shown. That went back live to, which is real typical Kiwi. Pukari Kariana, all these songs playing in the background. How more Kiwi can you get? This is after the speech is finished. Sounds like Rawari might be a little bit too close to the microphone, but And it's not a very accurate shot here of these people coming in and giving her a hug. But the queue at one stage was like 20 people. It's like what we need to do now is get in the queue and give Auntie a cuddle. That's what you do at the end of the thing. And it's like every person, and there were like Luxon in there as well, giving her a cuddle, saying, a cuddle sounds a bit weird, but giving her a hug. But the queue was large and mammoth. If you have a look, they'll show it, I'm sure, a little bit.
Do you know?
But I mean, of all the speeches, like this is Kiwi. This is how we finish. This is how we wrap up with the waiata and a bit of a cuddle. There you go. Look at the queue. Look, it just goes right out the shot, all the way around the corner for every person. Sorry, Chill, you go now, mate.
Oh, I was just going to say, do you know who was notable in their absence?
I didn't see David Seymour. I don't know if you were going to say his name.
David Seymour was not there.
He didn't go.
He didn't go, and considering his considering his recent comments on our latest competition in the political podcast space, Max Keys podcast, he was on there and he said some very tactless things and ungracious things towards Jacinda amongst others, and then he didn't turn up for this, which, I mean, Jesus.
That's pretty ugly because it's like there's always that thing that even if you don't like the person, you honor the office, the office of the prime minister, the office of the president, whatever it's going to be. And that's one of the important parts about it. I will say that I got an email today from David Seymour's office. He's happy to come on my Friday night show, so that'll be happening at some stage between now and the election, and maybe I'll ask him more about that. So I think it's pretty tactless not being there, paying a tribute to the office, if not the person. But in saying that, I think I'd rather someone who despised a person not turning up and being fake than turning up and ear kissing. You know what I'm saying? I'm not saying it's an okay response, but picking one over the other. So
I'd even widen that out. I'd widen that out to say, if you have a choice of any event, anything, any day, and you have a choice of David Seymour being there or David Seymour not being there, I will always choose David Seymour not being there. But it just shows how two-faced he is. When he was called an arrogant prick and made that a huge big thing, and then they signed the transcript and shook hands and made good for the media, and then he just does this again. I
guess what he's done is
the quality of the man.
I guess he's confirmed what was said, hasn't he?
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Now we're going to get into Robert Patman now. Is there anything you want to put up on the?
I've been starring the comments as we go through. So We've got comments from Gareth here. Sad to see her go. Watch out for Helen White, her new replacement in her electorate. She's absolutely top shelf. Carl says people demanded authenticity in their politicians, and then when they got it, they punished them for it. We're in the upside down.
It's like we listened to, was it Shamibil last night, who said we make people poor, and then we chastise them being poor, and then we help them because they're poor. So it's that same sort of cycle.
Free Soul commented on their Waiata being beautiful. Simple says, I'll miss her. She did a good job in difficult conditions. Peter here singles out her mention of the rabbit hole dwelling protester poignant to me amongst many other great points. Gareth says, I find it difficult to understand the utter hatred she got, especially from other women. Arrest JK, he says, no one, let alone a politician, is perfect. Definitely had a lot she led us through, and thankful to her for it. Lots more I'd wish she'd done as well. I think that pretty much echoes my thoughts.
I think everybody's thoughts, like they had an opportunity with the majority to literally do whatever they wanted to. They could have been transformative. Now, if it was because of COVID that they weren't, or if it's because they were trying to play more centrist, I don't know. But the reality is they didn't.
Or maybe it's just a case that, like, the things that they've tried to deal with. I saw some graphs today that made me think of amongst various things, that a lot of the things that they're trying to fix, none of them are quick fixes.
Yeah, maybe.
And it's very easy to wreck and drop funding more than it is to build it up and get results. And Rob Burney, go on, Chewy, say it. Nationalise Jacinda. If I could, mate, I would.
All right. Okay, so we are going to jump into a conversation around Trump now. We have 2 interviews coming up for you. Chewy and I will come back in between. The first one is with Professor Robert Patman. Now, I got Professor Robert Patman on because he is a specialist in US foreign policy. And I wanted to talk to him about the ramifications politically to do with Trump's arrest, charges, whatever the correct term is. And then shortly, we're going to be having a chat with our contributor out of Auckland University, who is a former prosecutor in the New York District Attorney's Office, about the legal ramifications for this as well. So if we're good to go, we'll get into it right now, and we'll start off with a conversation with Professor Robert Patman about Donald Trump. Here we go. Welcome to the show, Professor Robert Patman from the University of Otago, who has many caps and wears many special caps and has lots of areas of expertise, one of which, though, is US foreign policy. Who better to talk to about the political ramifications of what happened in New York today, New Zealand time, with Donald Trump, but Professor Robert Patman. Welcome, sir.
Thanks, Pat. It's a pleasure to be with you.
Yeah, I haven't talked to you for a while, so thank you for jumping in and having a chat with us. Listen, this is really interesting, and I don't know how much we need to go into the legalities of it. We've actually got a professor from Auckland University coming up shortly from the law department who's going to talk to us about the legalities of the whole situation. But I'd really love to get a nutshell from you, a kind of an understanding as to what this means politically as well, because I started to watch some of Donald Trump's speech he made at Mar-a-Lago after leaving New York, and honestly, it was just like watching a 60s band play their top 3 #1 hits from the 1960s. It was all those things he's been saying for 3 or 4 years and not addressing anything of the recent accusations. Let me just throw the ball to you and say Donald Trump in court today, 34 charges, some of them to felony status. What are your thoughts politically around this?
Well, I think, Mr. Trump is the subject of 4 separate investigations, legal investigations. This is just one of them, and it's probably the weakest. 2 other investigations, of course, include Mr. Trump's possible involvement in electoral irregularities in Georgia, and the other one, which of course is involved with the possible connection with the events of 6th of January 2021. These are both serious areas, and I'm not minimizing the seriousness of the hush money situation which Mr. Trump has been involved in today. As I understand it, the case against Mr. Trump was unsealed today, and it centres on alleged criminal activity relating to hush money paid to a porn star, Stormy Daniels, and the fact that business records were then illegally amended to cover this up.
Yeah.
And the business records, of course, involve the Trump organization. So many legal analysts, and I defer to their knowledge, believe this is probably the weakest of the four avenues of investigation into Mr. Trump. But it looks like Mr. Trump has politically, to come to your question, an answer, try and address your question, is that Mr. Trump is likely to politically gain from this. Even his opponents within the Republican Party have rallied to his defense since this indictment has been announced, and people like Mr. DeSantis and others in the Republican Party have basically felt they had to rally round Mr. Trump in this situation. So it's polarizing the United States. We don't know to what extent it's polarizing it, and to what extent it's an even split, or is it basically a relatively small minority venting against the indictment of Trump. He's the first former president to face criminal charges of this nature. It's unprecedented. It's certainly a shock for the American political system. And the Republicans argue that it's unnecessary, or some of them argue that it's unnecessary, and is going to change America for the worse. But the Democrats insist that this is part and parcel of the process of making sure no one, however well financed, however wealthy they are, is above the law.
Yeah.
It's in the short term, it looks like Mr. Trump is the polling numbers suggest he has politically gained from it. 3 months ago, he was facing the formidable challenging of Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor. When I say formidable, I'm not reflecting on the merits of his attempt to win the presidency, but the fact the numbers suggest that he was a serious contender. Fox News declared DeSantis the new leader of the Republican Party.
Yep, the future.
But in the intervening period, particularly since the indictment, Mr. Trump, I think, has mobilized the Republican base in his favor, and the numbers have really improved for Mr. Trump. So ironically, while Mr. Trump is facing this legal battle, politically, he seems to be thriving. And it's also very interesting that the Lincoln Project revealed today, the Lincoln Project, for our viewers, is a project which is anti-Trump, which is basically the disenchanted centrists within the Republican Party who feel the far right have hijacked the Republican Party.
Yeah.
They have made the point, and it hasn't been disputed, that Mr. Trump was offered the possibility to do this arraignment by Zoom. But he chose instead to travel to New York and to win huge media coverage, and it has been 24/7 coverage since he's been in New York.
Yeah,
and milk that for all it's worth. So there is a degree of political exploitation here by the Trump camp. I don't think anyone has disputed the veracity of what the Lincoln Project has alleged, that Trump could have done all this by Zoom and with very little coverage, but he chose to go for the more publicly exposed option. And it's so there is a sense that he's politically gaining from this process in the short term.
Yeah. Well, that's a very good point. I mean, I haven't heard about the Lincoln Project, so we'll have a look at that, and if I can find some video on that, we'll play it after this pre-recorded interview. But we're going to talk the legality of it shortly, as I said. But my understanding is that at its most simple, like if I have a business and I say that I'm spending $10,000 on a business vehicle, but really I'm using that to bribe someone else, then that's a criminal act. In America, that's a misdemeanor. So the stuff that's been written off as Stormy Daniels has been written off as something else and come through the business to pay for that. Then you put on top of that what's happening with it was also to keep information away from the public that then jumps up for whatever legal reason to a felony attempt. I mean, the idea of the Stormy Daniels money seems to be almost indisputable, and it just makes me think, albeit he's innocent until proven guilty, I guess, we can probably be looser with it in New Zealand because we don't come under their laws based in America. But it makes me think about Al Capone being done for tax evasion. You know, something that actually ended up putting Al Capone away wasn't necessarily any of those big, massive, terrible things that he did. So I see the polls jumped quite significantly with Trump taking an even bigger lead over DeSantis, even though DeSantis hasn't declared yet. But I'm also hearing word, I'd like your thoughts around this, that this might help him with his base, the Republican base, but, you know, typically charging a candidate with pretty serious crimes will probably not fly in the general election. So you said right now, like as of right now, that is, do you buy into that theory that this might be good to get him on the ticket, but it'll end up being anchor around his neck should he be the nominee?
Yes, it could do, particularly if the Biden administration stays well clear of the process. That is, it's not politicized in the eyes of most Americans. That this is just the legal machinery playing out without interference from the government. But I think the point you've just raised, Pat, is an important one, which is that mobilizing your political base is not the same as becoming a really formidable candidate for winning the White House back.
Yeah.
People who may be tempted by either Republicans or Democrats may not be impressed by someone who's you see, he's got very, very serious legal problems ahead. Even if this case is dismissed, you know, the Trump lawyer is very formidable team of lawyers. Even if they succeed, they face, you know, far serious legal challenges. The Democrats have openly expressed their frustration that the weakest of the four legal investigations into Mr. Trump has appeared first, which might give Trump some momentum for the tougher cases. But I still think he's facing formidable challenges, and it could yet still work out to Mr. DeSantis' advantage if he declares, because he will be able to present himself as the Republican contender, which he's not having to continually defend himself against legal problems. And I think for many, even members of the Republican base, that will face them with tough choices. At the moment, we're seeing a rallying around the former president. How long that rallying round continues remains to be seen. So, yeah, and the thing is that Mr. Trump doesn't pull any punches. You refer to his speech at his home, based in Florida. He is not in any way discouraging protests on his behalf.
Yep.
And there is the potential it could get ugly.
Yeah. I'm really interested in what it does mean politically. I mean, I think, as you say, rallying the base is an important part of it. And even though you say some of the Democrats seem to be a bit disappointed that the easiest kind of case came up first, I've also heard the counterpoints that some of the DAs, the three of the people bringing the charges, were all kind of waiting for the other one else to go first. Then once the other one of them went first, then it kind of frees them up to then join on with more of it. So maybe the flip side of that was it's good that the easy one came out first because it gives the more serious ones, not that they've got now a right to charge, but maybe they've got less heat in bringing those charges. And one thing that we do know about Trump is if he wants to, with the wave of his magic hair or the flick of his little tiny hands, he can bring heat pretty damn quickly to people and to organizations.
Yeah, I mean, it's a fascinating situation, but I think if we think about it, it's in a wider international context. What's happening in the US is very damaging.
Yeah,
and it does not do anything to boost America's global standing. Let's just take a debate that's happening in New Zealand at the moment, so that our viewers can see a connection between what's happening in the United States and New Zealand's foreign policy, for example, there's a debate whether we should be an associate member of AUKUS, this security arrangement involving the United States, Australia, and the UK. There are voices in this country saying, look, we can't afford to be left out of this arrangement, and we can sort of go in on a partial basis. We don't have to have anything to do with the nuclear tranche of this arrangement. We can simply be involved in the technology sharing aspect of it. And then you think, well, yes, maybe. I'm skeptical that's possible, actually, but there is an argument being put forward. But then you think to yourself, now what happens if Donald Trump or Ron DeSantis becomes president in 2024? Would New Zealand be happy to be part of an alliance which would be headed by two candidates, or if it was Mr. DeSantis or Donald Trump, whose vision of the world is completely different from our own, and who don't have much respect for the rules-based order on which this country depends?
Could that not be argued though, with no matter who won that? Let's say we're in there with the UK, the same thing could be argued. I guess Trump and DeSantis are extreme versions, but any of those countries you've listed could also do that on some level, get to a worldview which is completely contrary to ours, or vice versa. Our worldview, depending on who would be our prime minister, and end of this year, could be completely different to theirs. Are you saying that Trump and DeSantis are so far outside the norm that it's amplified even worse?
What I'm saying is, Pat, compared with the past, when the differences between Republicans and Democrats were in terms of, in foreign policy terms, were in terms of emphasis rather than a chasm.
Yeah.
At the moment, we have an administration that most New Zealanders feel quite comfortable with. Biden's a big supporter of NATO. We have a big stake in Mr. Putin not succeeding in Ukraine, and Mr. Biden shares that view. So we don't have many problems with that. We may disagree with the United States on how we should tackle China, and indeed that's probably why there is some skepticism here about AUKUS. But as I say, the difference now between the Republican opposition, many elements in some of the people who are most vociferous in support of Trump at the moment actually are sympathetic for Putin's invasion of Ukraine.
Fair.
So all I'm saying is the polarization that America is experiencing at the moment has global ramifications for the credibility of its diplomacy.
So last question then, speaking of the credibility of America, on some level I wrote down downfall of the US when you were saying that. Should, let's say, whoever the Democrat nominee be at the end of next year romp home, will that actually fix America's credibility around the world? Will the world then look at them and go, oh, there's some lunatics in the hen house, but overall America is still stable because they didn't get over? Or is all of this Marjorie Taylor Greene, Lauren Boebert, Ron DeSantis, is that no matter they win or lose, that credibility is shot and it will always be shot, until future notice?
No, I think since 9/11, I think, and particularly following the illegal invasion of Iraq, America's standing amongst other liberal democracies has diminished.
Right.
And so we've been alluding to a specific problem relating to the Republican Party, but there are more general problems. In the eyes of other liberal democracies, America has become less attractive as a political model, and certainly most democracies now don't feel they should be emulating the United States. After all, this is a system which seems incapable of dealing with reoccurring problems like gun violence, and seems incapable of dealing with racial violence. We do get, denunciations of this following racial violence involving the police, but we also get denunciations of gun violence. But from the point of view of other democracies, including New Zealand, it doesn't, one of the characteristics of a democracy is the ability theoretically, a democracy has the inbuilt ability to correct problems. That is to say, unlike an authoritarian regime, when there's a problem, you vote for someone who promises to put it right, and that's part of their appeal. So in theory, when a democracy experiences economic policy problems or social problems, you can vote for someone who promises to put it right. There's a peaceful transfer of power and the system can correct itself. But the depressing thing since 9/11 is that America seems to have domestically and in social policy seems to have confronted a number of problems which seem to be reoccurring, and they doesn't seem to be the means to fix them. And so I think that added to the polarization that the Trump era has brought, that America, its global standing has diminished. And I don't think there's going to be a quick fix for that, even if Mr. Biden is re-elected.
Wow. So their credibility is gone, and there's no obvious way that you can say that they can possibly get it back again.
I wouldn't say it's gone, Pat. I would say it's eroded.
Okay.
I think Mr. Biden did a reasonable job in trying to restore that.
Yeah.
On some areas, he's been very tentative and unable to reverse, unable to counter the power of the National Riflemen's Association, who have, quite a lot of clout in that country. And that's very frustrating for many Americans because it doesn't do anything to rehabilitate the reputation of Washington in the eyes of many Americans, because all public polls in polling institutions in the United States show that a majority of people do want serious gun control. They do want to see an end of this sort of violence that they're seeing in their cities related to guns. So, but that's not translating into policy initiatives in Washington. So there is a frustration there, and it's a real test for American leadership. Can America adapt to a world in which many of the problems we face require international, not national solutions? Can America step up and play its part and become a good international citizen in helping to fashion solutions to those problems?
From the University of Otago, it's Professor Robert Patman. Robert, thanks so much for joining us tonight. As always, it's a pleasure, and we appreciate your time.
Thanks very much, Pat. Cheers.
And we're back again. Okay, there you go, Chewy. I know you've been monitoring the text and stuff. I need to go and sort out my massive balls up with the next video. Why don't you take over and tell us what the story is?
Some really good, but I love this points about just the general erosion of America in the eyes of the world. I think the last let's say 20 years have been really corrosive to America's reputation, and certainly Trump and co really poured the battery acid on it. I think with everybody looking at an election next year, and we've said it before, the Democrats can't run Biden. They can't. They've got to put someone else up, and there's no indication of who that would be.
Yeah, and at the moment, they're not making much of an indication that is actually going to be the case. In fact, they've said numerous people have said Biden is running again, which is scary. Here's the tweet that Robert was talking about, Lincoln Project. Trump was given the option to be arraigned over Zoom. Instead, he chose to create a spectacle flying to New York, staying at Trump Towers to be arraigned in person. Why? He wants to dominate the news cycle and suck every penny from his followers by painting himself as a victim.
Yeah, 100%. I mean, that worked really, really well from last time. Like all of the news cycle and the run up to the election was generally really negative about him.
Yeah,
but people didn't care. He was the fringe clown that the news media jumped on of whatever shocking thing he said that day, but he was always in the news for it. And that's before he had the following that he has now.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. It is literally the old marketing term of any news, any coverage is good coverage.
Yeah, he does seem to be a proponent of that, because that's not true. I mean, if you just ask a pedophile if any exposure is good exposure, it's not. Any news is good news. It's not, because sometimes, I mean, ask anyone who's been lost their job because they've been exposed for doing something terrible. It's It's not, but he does seem to be someone who sort of adheres to that. It's like, if my name's in the headlines, that's all that matters. And you know what? It kind of worked in 2016. He got over $1 billion worth of free press because any headline he made, he was able to spin. I mean, you give him credit where credit's due. He knows how to work the media, if nothing else, if literally nothing else.
People are literally giving him money now because he's been indicted. It's income for him.
Yeah.
And I think whether you're someone in the Republican Party that is like, this is really done damage to our side of the house, or whether you're Democrats going, we can't let this guy get back in.
Mm-hmm.
I think he's still someone that people have to worry about. I mean, there's a lot of talk about DeSantis. DeSantis, I think, has the potential to be much, much, much worse than Trump, because I think he's smarter.
Yeah. Scott Optican is a associate professor at Auckland University, and he's in the Faculty of Law. In the 80s and 90s, he worked in New York at both the DA's office and another office, a district court office, I think, as well. And so I have a quick chat with him now. It's not as long as that last interview, but the thing we talked about is really delving into what the legalities of this whole thing is. And one of the things that interested me most of all, which I do ask him in this, is because he was in the New York DA's office in the 80s and 90s, did he ever come across Trump in any of his cases? Because Trump was, in courts in those places as well. So let's jump over and have a look at this now. It's going to look a bit different because I've stuffed up the beginning of it. Yeah, apologies for that. Here it is, though. Look at us. We're looking beautiful. That's Scott, and that's me. And this is the conversation that the two of us had earlier this evening. Scott Optican is an associate professor at the University of Auckland Faculty of Law, among many other feathers. Scott served as a prosecutor in the New York County District's Attorney's Office and clerked in the Federal District Court for the Southern District of New York. Welcome to the show, Scott. Very excited to talk to you.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
I'm assuming when you worked in those offices, both based in and around New York, maybe you not personally, but your offices probably had something to do with Donald Trump from time to time as well, because he was pretty big in the legal sense of the place around the time you were working in there.
Yeah, I mean, as a matter of fact, the office that indicted him, that brought this current prosecution, the New York County District Attorney's Office, that was the office that I worked in for a year. So that was my old office. Yeah, I mean, they were the ones who have taken the lead now on being the first prosecutors ever actually file criminal charges against Trump himself. Of course, they successfully prosecuted the Trump organization just within the last few months. So they're the ones that brought the criminal case against the Trump organization for tax and other kinds of business fraud that was successful and resulted in a fine. And also got the guilty plea from his chief financial officer, Alan Weisselberg. But this is a different order of magnitude, because this is the first time that any prosecutor anywhere in the United States has ever brought charges against Donald Trump or against an elected president. And so that's why the case is unique.
Now, I think for some people, this is all their Christmases rolled up in once, thinking about Donald Trump being in a kind of criminal court, in a court setting. And we could probably talk about all sorts of things for all sorts of time, but to kind of expedite the conversation, are you able to just explain to us, the moron punters at the bottom of the barrel, exactly what's going on and exactly why he's in court?
Sure. So the indictment was unsealed today. An indictment is just an American term for a charging document. And he was arraigned in court today, which basically means he made a very quick court appearance to plead not guilty, be released on his own recognizance, and then the case will proceed from here with legal motions and, eventually a trial sometime in 2024. What the case is about is relatively simple. There are 34 counts in the case. The counts are a fraudulent filing of a business record in New York City. So in other words, there are 34 counts related to fraudulent business record filings, whether they be checks, invoices, or receipts. The fraud was alleged to have taken place because Donald Trump, several weeks before he was elected, through his lawyer, someone named Michael Cohen, who's already pled guilty in this case.
and done jail time.
And done jail time, and is going to be a witness against him at this trial.
Yeah.
What he did is Michael Cohen paid, at Donald Trump's instigation, according to Michael Cohen, he paid $130,000 to Stormy Daniels, an adult film actress with whom Donald was alleged to have had a sexual affair with. And he wanted to cover that up so it didn't come out in the several weeks before the election because he thought it would lose him votes.
I think it was days, wasn't it? Wasn't it days before
I
the
think it was
election?
about 2 weeks. I think it was about
Yeah,
2
okay.
weeks before the election. But the alleged affair had happened years before.
Yeah.
So this was part of the catch and kill agreement that he had with the, with David Pecker and the Inquirer.
And for people, the catch and killers, catch any rumors that might harm you and kill those rumors. And in this instance, by paying someone off. There could be other ways they killed it, but that's for this one.
And this particular payoff didn't necessarily involve Pecker directly, but this one just involved Trump using his own money through the Trump Organization, funneled through Michael Cohen to pay this money to Stormy Daniels. Now, in and of itself, paying hush money to someone is not a crime. You can actually pay someone not to disclose disturbing things about you. It becomes a crime when in your financial records, as part of the Trump Organization, you denominate it as legal fees, as a retainer fees, which it wasn't.
Gotcha.
And then it becomes a felony under New York law when you are committing that crime, which is the false business records, in furtherance of another crime. And the other crime is attempting to unlawfully and fraudulently influence an election. So the reason that this rather ordinary business document crime becomes a more serious felony is because it was in the service of a much more serious crime, which was a violation of New York State and federal election laws, which if you're making a payment to someone to influence an election, which this arguably, allegedly was, that is a campaign contribution. You have to denominate that as a campaign contribution. You have to book it as a campaign contribution. You have to disclose it as a campaign contribution. And there are limits on how much you can pay. So the basic charge is 34 counts of fraudulent business records related to the documentation around this hush money payment, illegally and fraudulently denominated as legal fees or retainer paid to Cohen in the service of unlawfully influencing an election in violation of state and or federal laws because it was effectively a campaign contribution in kind that wasn't booked as such and was in violation of the total amount you can spend and the disclosure requirements thereof. That's it in a nutshell.
I think this is the greatest explanation of what's going on in the history of the world, Scott. I think that this clip should go viral to every news network in the world. I think you've just nutshelled it so beautifully. Explain to me this, so to put it into layman's terms for me, right? I run a business. I put on my books and I put into my accounts that I spent $10,000 on a ute, a vehicle for my business. But really what I did was take that money and paid someone to do something disastrously. So in other words, what I've got on my records, what I've put to the IRD here in New Zealand is $10,000 for a vehicle, but I've done it for something else. That's the first misdemeanor, isn't it?
That's the misdemeanor. That's the first crime. Right.
And then the second one is I take my $10,000, which I was going to spend on my ute. Obviously, it's a very old secondhand ute for that sort of money, and I give it to someone else. And in my books, it says, a vehicle for business. And I say to them, I want you to do something bad with this.
That's right.
And using that money to do another crime elevates it to, in America, what's a felony? We don't have felonies in New Zealand, but a more serious crime, and that's how you've got to that level. Have I kind of layman's term nutshelled it back to you?
That is completely accurate, and the felony in this case is fraudulently influencing an election. So it's not nothing. So if someone ever says to you, this is just a process crime, it's a business crime, it's a paper crime, the answer should be, well, it's a paper crime in the service of something a lot more serious, which is actually trying to influence the outcome of the United States presidential election. That's a big deal.
Yeah. What I can't quite understand, other than the game of politics, is how anyone can sort of deny that first misdemeanor crime, because that seems cut and dry that happened. I know that everyone's innocent until proven guilty. You've got to put the papers, but it doesn't seem that anyone's sort of disagreeing with that. But Donald Trump, of course, getting on his soapbox is going on and on. None of this stuff happened, but it seems that everyone admits that did actually happen. Am I right in that, or is there still discrepancy between the parties?
Well, I mean, so you have to ask yourself. So let's go. What are the possible defenses to that crime, right? So let's start with the bigger crime. The defense to the felony crime is I paid the money to Stormy Daniels not to influence the election, but to spare my wife the embarrassment of that case. Right. Sure. So that's his defense there. I wasn't doing it for an election related reason. I was doing it for a lawful reason. I wanted to protect my family, protect my wife, and that's why I did that. So that would be the defense to that crime. The defense to the misdemeanor, the actual record-keeping crime, to be honest, to me at this point, it's not completely clear what their defense is going to be. Their defense could be this was all Michael Cohen's idea, and I had nothing to do with this.
He still has to sign, but Trump still has to sign it off, even if he's not. Even if he says to his lawyer, "Is it right?" and the lawyer says yes, Donald Trump still puts his signature on the bottom of it, then, though, doesn't he?
Yeah, I mean, he could defend by saying, "I honestly thought these were lawyers' fees.
Yeah.
I honestly thought this was a retainer fee. This was Cohen's idea. I knew nothing about it. You know, in the end, I understood that it was, you know, that there was money paid to Stormy Daniels, but at the time I signed the checks or made the entries, it wasn't me, it was someone else. I didn't have an intent to fraud. I did it in good faith. You know, none of this was my doing." I personally think that's a bit of a stretch, given what the evidence I've seen. Given what the evidence I've seen so far is. But let's put it this way. I mean, they're going to defend this case. They're going to defend this case on all fronts. And so the only way you can come up with a defense to this fraudulent business record case is kind of one of two ways. A, I didn't have the intent to defraud. I mean, I did it in good faith or innocently or whatever. Or B, I'm not the one who did it. Whoever committed the fraud, it wasn't me. So far on the evidence, it looks like they have the goods. But my guess is part of their defense on this is going to be to pin the whole scheme on Cohen or someone else in the Trump organization, and to say that Trump was just kept out of the loop and honestly thought he was paying lawyers' fees.
Without obviously knowing the outcomes, and like we all watched the OJ trial, so anything can happen in court. Do you think that New York has a pretty strong case here? Do you expect that this is strong enough for a conviction, or we're understanding that there are 3 potential cases? This one has been brought. There's 2 others. The 2 others, which are
there's 3 others.
Three others. So there's the Georgia phone call. There's the January 6th. What's the third one?
The third one is the Mar-a-Lago documents case, which is being investigated by the same prosecutor, Jack Smith, in the U.S. Justice Department, who was investigating the insurrection case. So the Fannie Willis case in Georgia, the special grand jury has just concluded, and she's getting ready now to present it to the grand jury that can file the charges. And then Jack Smith has got the Mar-a-Lago documents, confidential documents case, and the insurrection case. So this could be the first of several. Now, you want to ask me, make a prediction as to how this case is going to be.
I'm just saying, and if you had that evidence on your table, what you've seen on your desk, does it look like a pretty strong case, this first one?
No, I mean, here's what it looks like to me. Yeah. I think the case does look pretty strong. I think there are some problems with the legal theory of ratcheting it up to the felony based on the election law violation. There are certain legal niceties that may not permit that election law claim to be used to ratchet it up. And the first thing Trump's going to do is file legal arguments saying that the business record crime in service of the election crime, that is not a crime that can ratchet it up. As a matter of law, only certain crimes can ratchet that up to a felony. These are not those sorts of crimes. And those will be quite complex legal arguments around that. You know, other than that, they're going to go after Cohen big time. Mm-hmm. You know, he does have some, credibility issues, no doubt about it. They're going to say he's already pled guilty. His book is entitled Revenge. They wrote it. That's going to be a good question in cross-examination, right?
Yeah.
But what Cohen is going to say, and I saw this many times when I was, a judge's clerk in the Southern District of New York, and when they did mob cases and stuff. I mean, essentially, when the defense lawyers say, well, this guy was in the mob and he's got a motive to lie, and the answer is, yeah, but he lied in service of Donald Trump. So Cohen's answer is, yeah, I was a liar. I did this, I did that, but I did that all at the behest and at the bequest of Donald Trump. And by the way, you don't have to believe me. Here are the checks. Here's the recording. Here's the documents. Here's everything. So from what I saw today in the indictment, I've seen in the narrative of facts which accompanied the indictment, which is kind of like the story laid out in narrative form, they're not just depending on Cohen. They're depending on documents. They've got documents. They've got recordings, and that's how they're going to make their case. Interestingly enough, they also put into the narrative of facts another payment that he was alleged to have made to this woman named Karen McDougal before Stormy Daniels, part of Catch and Kill. And another catch and kill story that Pecker got involved with was there's a doorman at Trump's building, which was claiming he had some information about, Trump fathering a child out of wedlock. So even though those are not part of the charge counts in the case, I think evidentially the prosecutor is going to try to bring that in to show a pattern of fraudulent conduct here, of which the Stormy Daniels payoff was just one part of it. And that's going to be an interesting evidential argument to see how they can contextualize this with other crimes evidence that aren't necessarily part of the indictment itself.
Hey, a personal question, Scott. You're obviously from North America. I'm assuming you are American. Are you a US American citizen?
I'm a Kiwi American. I've got two passports now. Yeah.
Okay, so you've lived in America. You're looking at one of your American passport, former presidents in court today. How do you feel about that personally?
This is an interesting question because there's been a bit of a convention in the United States. I mean, Nixon, Bill Clinton as examples of people who arguably committed crimes that were never charged criminally. Not that they didn't pay consequences. Nixon resigned. Clinton made a deal with the prosecutors to give up his law license to avoid criminal prosecution over perjury in the Paula Jones case and the Lewinsky case. There's been a bit of a convention that we don't prosecute our former presidents because there's a bit of a notion that if you look at failed states, they very often will prosecute their political enemies once they get out of power. I definitely think that's an issue, and I am a little concerned about the political implications of prosecuting a former president. But you know what I'm more concerned about is not prosecuting one.
Yeah.
Because if you look at another characteristic of failed states, one of the things they don't do is hold their leaders to account. And if I had to balance things up, I am more concerned with not holding Donald Trump to account than I am with the political implications of holding him to account, because I think one of the founding principles of democracy, which I believe in, is that everyone is equal under the law. So, Trump and his people are going to spin this as, the deep state, they're not coming for me, they're coming for you. This is unjust. This is all political prosecutions. There is no evidence of that so far whatsoever. In fact, what there is a grand jury of 23 people who thought there was reasonable cause to believe that 34 separate crimes have been committed by Donald Trump. Yeah. And we make the same result in Georgia and the same result with our federal grand juries. And so I think the most important principle here is that no person is above the law. Donald Trump will get the same due process and fair trial rights as everybody else, and we'll just see what the jury decides.
Hey, Scott, it's been fantastic talking to you this evening. I hope we can have you back because it sounds like we've at least got 3 other conversations to be had about other charges that are coming. But I very much appreciate you giving us some time today. I sometimes feel like when I do some Googling around and searching, I find little gems in the academic world, and you feel like you're one of them. So thank you very much for giving us some time this evening to have a chat about this. And we'll stay in touch, and hopefully we'll talk to you again sometime.
It's my pleasure. Anytime. Thank you. Thank you very much for the opportunity.
And we're back. Super quick. Had to just change that super quick. Super quick. Had to come back super quick because I haven't edited that properly. So there you go, Chewy. There's a man who has actually worked in the office, was a lawyer in the office, in the place that's just charging Trump. I mean, yourself or any of the comments that have been coming in, anything you want to mention?
Oh, look, I just think that was fantastic. I was trying to explain this to someone earlier today, and I just don't have a grasp on the American system. What he was outside of going, oh yeah, he's going to jail because he's bribed a porn star, which is funny, but not necessarily accurate. Just what steps have been taken, how he's fucked up.
Yeah, well if people want to do this, we often talk about be our advocates, share our stuff. I've done a little 4-minute clip. And this 4-minute clip here, 3 minutes 54, it's on my Twitter feed and it's on our YouTube channel, is just the 4 minutes of him talking about what the charges are all about. So like Chewy, like me, before I talked to him, I kind of had a gist of an idea, which is why I came up with that kind of business vehicle idea. We talk to you often about be our advocates. I honestly think, and not because it's on our show, the 4 minutes he just gave us there with just the charges were the best 4 minutes I've seen on any media outlet 100%. Explaining in a nutshell what Trump's charges are. So if you want to use that and pass it on, forward the tweet on, use it on our YouTube channel, share it around. If people want to know what Trump's charges are and why they are, he's explained it beautifully. And yeah, as I said, I think we found a gem there in the associate professor, and I think we will be back in contact with him, fairly regularly. What do we say? Friend of the show. So yeah, I feel well informed as to what's been going on and why, and I hope others do as well.
Yep.
Anything in the chat we need to get to?
I'm going to start with a comment that I just want to put up here. Gareth H saying Biden was an up and coming Democrat when Jesus was arrested. Very, very good. Lots of debate in the chat over who should have run, who should run, that sort of thing. Simon here says Hillary Clinton was a terrible candidate. It made Trump look good. I think Biden would have beaten Trump in 2016.
I think that if you look at the stats in the polls, Trump was the most disliked presidential candidate in the history of the world in 2016. Mm-hmm. Guess who the second most disliked was?
Was it
Hillary Clinton?
Hillary Clinton. Yeah,
so in other words,
terrible options.
Yeah, anyone better than and Trump had enough support, and there was enough of a protest vote against Hillary as well to get him through. Now, you'll notice as well that since that, he's lost basically 3 elections, 1 of his presidency and 2 of the midterms based on Trump. So actually, he snuck by the second worst statistically candidate there's ever been in the polls, at least. And then 3 elections in a row, he's lost. I mean, the midterms, he wasn't running, but you know what I mean? All the people who were running on his ticket lost.
Yeah.
So he lost the House. He lost both of them. He lost the presidency. He didn't get Congress back. Oh, sorry, he did get Congress back only just, but then he didn't get the Senate back, which he should have done under his name. So he's a big loser. He's a big loser.
And yet they're still going to be dealing with the fallout of MAGA for years. Yep. Just trying to get this influence out. Like the other thing that happened in the chat is people talking about the good old days of the Republican Party when you had the post-war period.
Ronald Reagan.
No, that's not what we're talking about at all, Pat. That's where it all started to go wrong. But Roosevelt and Eisenhower and such, classic Republicans.
But Reagan's a moderate compared to what there is now. That's the point.
And that's mental.
Yeah.
That's mental. But he started the erosion.
Yeah.
That has led America to where it is, which is just like I just feel like I'm taking crazy pills and just looking at it and going, so when is this all going to fall over, and how bad is it going to be for the rest of the world?
I don't know if it was Reagan or if it was more the era, because Thatcher, Muldoon, Reagan, he doesn't have own it. Yeah. I wonder if it was more the era and conservatives rather than Reagan in particular. But you're right. It was under him. Like it could have been. Well, I guess what I'm saying is probably any conservative in America would have done that in that era, because that what was happening in the era the Western world over. So,
and I mean, I guess part of the bigger issues there is like America in the space of 70, 80 years has squandered that leader of the free world, arsenal of democracy, bastion of Western civilization. They have squandered that, and there's people in the chat have talked about Vietnam was what led me down the path of being a lefty. Their invasions through and regime change through Central America, the Gulf Wars, Afghanistan. Yeah, I can kind of get there, but they definitely fucked that up as well.
Yeah,
and there's a lot of rehabilitation that's going on there, and even at the moment with their support for Ukraine, there's criticism from MAGA and the far left.
Yeah,
and it's just like, oh my god,
and we're seeing it. I mean, it's flooding. I don't know. I can't remember actually. I talked to Robert about it, but we're seeing it. MAGA is influencing the world over.
Oh, 100%.
But in various forms. They're taking, and you can see, right-wing political commentators and broadcasters in New Zealand taking on the right-wing political commentators and broadcasters, ideas from America now, albeit they're about 12 months behind because they're so stupid they can't figure out they can grift more easily with it. But then you can see almost word for word, some of the things, and I'm not just talking about the fringies, you know, but there's some stuff you see coming through ACT and stuff at the moment. You can very much adhere to or have a look at what's been happening within the MAGA world. Not that they're saying the MAGA things for MAGA's sake, but you can hear the themes, you can feel the themes running through. So
neoliberalism, you know, libertarianism. You know, if we talk about the 80s and that, you know, Rogernomics for New Zealand was incredibly corrosive, and we're still dealing with the fallouts from that.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, the 80s. Yuck.
I do want to just touch now the News Hub shows how much news there was around today. The News Hub did a thing on the OCR today, and it was a minute 48 long. That's how much credibility they gave to a 50-point basis rise. I do want to play that because we said we're going to, but before we do, was there anything else in the chat to do with the conversation we've just had that needs to, or you want to go up?
No, it was flying so fast I didn't actually get to star much. Apart from excellent interview.
Oh, bless.
2 great interviews, and
bless.
I agree. They're some of the best guests and interviews we've had in a little while. So,
look, I part of me I almost wanted to put a voice modulator on the guest from Auckland University, because I don't know why he's not on every single fucking New Zealand
he's
broadcast.
ours now.
He's ours. Stay away from me, you fuckers. Exclusive. Yeah, I'm gonna start paying him half of the Patreon to be exclusive to us. All right, now OCR today. I've had some thoughts about the OCR today and the rates going up. Let's have a quick listen. It's only a minute and a half to the story from News Hub.
The Reserve Bank's defied predictions by bumping the official cash rate up by 50 basis points to highs not seen since the 2008 global financial crisis.
The financial crisis. To rein in inflation, but mortgage holders can expect to feel more pain before there's any relief. Kethiki Masalamani reports.
Whoa.
Hannah McQueen is a financial advisor with a growing list of clients.
Hi, Hannah.
People do seek more help when things get harder.
Harder because rising interest rates are confronting many New Zealand homeowners. And today's rate hike to 5.25% won't be welcome news.
For some families, this will be a bloodbath event where they perhaps would have fixed a year ago or a year or two ago at 2%. Now it's going to be closer to 6.5%, 7%.
On a $600,000 mortgage, that's an extra $500 a week a family needs to try and find.
It's about removing demand from the economy. So, either via borrowing less, spending less, or saving more.
In many cases, the rate hike was predicted and priced into mortgages. And there is some good news for those just coming into the market.
From today's decision, we can probably say, those mortgage rates might stay higher for longer. The silver lining, if you like, is that house prices are a lot lower than they were.
Generally 10 to 15%. Wellington's down 20%. So that's kind of where the market sits.
The rate hikes are expected to ease next year as the Reserve Bank attempts to engineer a soft recession.
It's unlikely you're going to have prolonged unemployment. That is a good thing. That's not really a recession as we tend to know it.
And some are reading today's aggressive rate rise as an attempt to speed up that process. Kithki Masalamani, News Hub.
Right. Cancel. I just cancelled Jacinda. Is that okay? I just cancelled Jacinda. I feel like that's perhaps not appropriate. Am I okay? I didn't just break a rule. I'm gonna look something up. Mike Perot mortgages, mortgage calculator, because this is a bullshit line. I haven't done these numbers, so if I end up being wrong, I'll be wrong. Okay, so let's just do this together forever, right? We're going to go to a mortgage loan repayments. So let's have a look, because they're like some good news for new house buyers. So let's look at a $1 million house. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Paying back weekly. We'll go weekly because it's easier to figure out. At 6.25%. Oh, sorry. Now what we're going to do? What were rates before? Like 3%? We'll go 3%. So at 3%, right? And $1 million, it's $1,000 a week. It's $972 a week. So if you take 20% off that, 800,000, because they're saying 20%, and you make that 6.25, it's $200 a week more.
Yeah.
So this is a horse shit conversation. Oh, it's going to be good for now. Look, that wasn't a setup. I could have been wrong, right? I hadn't done that. You saw me do it live on air. This thing about this, some good news for first home buyers. No, it's not, because even if your house prices drop 10, 15, 20%, but your interest rates have doubled, it's exponentially more expensive. We did a story last year when this was starting where they said house affordability was at a 60-year high. So let's just get away from that horse shit. And I was thinking today, Chewy, as always, so the Reserve Bank is upping the OCR because inflation is high, to bring inflation down. We're being told we need more people to be unemployed to bring inflation down. It just seems that we're in a position once again where the poorest are going to be shat on hardest to quote unquote fix the economy.
Yep.
Because if
And
you're
I, for
wealthy and
one,
you've got a lot of money, you can probably afford that $500 a week, like a lot of money. If you don't have a lot of money, then you're losing your fucking home. And I just had the thought today for the first time. Look, I'm not an economist, and maybe there's something I'm missing, but I just felt today when I heard about this and thought about this, that once again, they're screwing over the worst off to fix the economy that often gets fucked up by the best of, i.e. the businesses and stuff. Now, I'm not saying that's the reason for the inflation at the moment, but that's how it feels to me today, and I'm not particularly happy about it, Joey.
Yeah, I'm not stoked. I'm due to fix in the next month or so. So this has been a fun day. But yeah, like I am really worried about the choices that are being made to get on top of inflation. It seems like they're relying on theory that's kind of been disproven or proven that there's better ways to do it. I consistently all the way through they've said, "Oh, we need to have more unemployed," and I'm just like, "No, those are real people, dude. Like, don't do that," because we know what happens when we have a lot of unemployment is that the political cycle shits on them, and we start talking about dole bludgers again. Some parties, they never stop talking about dole bludgers, even when the unemployment's under 3%. Act. I'm looking at you. Certainly, the Green Party kind of agrees with us on this point. The government's refusal to use deflationary measures such as excess profit taxes on banks or wealth taxes on those who profited handsomely throughout the global pandemic are choices. Today's RBNZ OCR rise will cause unnecessary and disproportionate pain for lower income New Zealand households. Absolutely. It's going to hurt the bottom. It's going to hurt the middle. It's not going to hurt the top.
Well, one good bit of news from today, Chewy. I've been messaging Shamabil Yaqub, who we fell in love with earlier this week off The Nation. And whilst he hadn't done enough research when I was talking to him to come and talk about the OCR, he has said happy to talk at a later stage. So we might get some more people coming to talk to us about it as we delve into this a bit more. But yeah, I just had that sense today. And I guess I'm not even blaming the Reserve Bank necessarily, because they're supposed to be independent and they're supposed to make the decision that they think will fix the inflation issue. But it always just seems to end up being the worst off are hit the worst off. Whereas the top 1, 5, 10%, yeah, they get hit because they've got mortgages too, but they're the ones that can absorb the hit more so than the worst off. And I'm just, like they're
not the ones that are going to be lining up for a food bank.
Yeah, exactly. So I don't know. I'm a bit over that, and I want us to delve into it a bit further. And we're going to keep looking at it. We just kind of want to highlight it tonight because we had a couple of log interviews. We're not going to spend a long time about it. So as we wrap.
There's actually a good suggestion from the chat there that we should probably both have a look at.
Yep.
Gareth mentioned, Pat, please check out John Stewart's interview, RE Inflation Control. Exactly what you're talking about. It's horrific. So,
oh, thanks. That's horrific. So, it's like watching Saw, is it in real life? It's horrific viewing. All right. Hey, guys, it's been a good show tonight. Thank you. I appreciate you being with us. Remember, there are multiple ways that you can support what we do. And one of the ways is we used to say #ShareOurShit, didn't we? Way back when. And you've seen 2 interviews tonight. Certainly, and I mean both of them, Robert Patman and the professor from Auckland University as well. And share it around. If you enjoyed the clip, the 4-minute clip that explained why Trump was being charged, it's on Twitter already. It's on YouTube already. Share it around. Other than that, you can get on board to Patreon and come and be a patron. Help us do what we do. Patreon.com/Big Hairy News. Thanks to all our patrons at the moment. And there's space on this. There's space on this for more names. Space. It's Easter. An Easter egg. And remember, if you become a patron of ours, you become 22% more attractive. You get 22% more charisma. And I've heard a rumor that your grows 22%. I don't know what it was. I think that was intelligence. I couldn't quite pick your intelligence. I think that was, but I'm not entirely sure. All right, Joey, mate. Anything else before we head off?
No, nothing from me. Apart from flashbanging myself with the monitor just then.
Reminding everybody as well, we will not be here Monday because Monday is a pubic holiday. But that's for next week. As for now, we will catch you tomorrow night at 9 p.m. for our Easter special. Oh, the other thing is I talked to the naked pastor this week. And we talked about him last week, who was drawing pictures about Jesus and trans sheep and the LGBT sheep people. I talked to him earlier in the week. I'm gonna make that podcast tomorrow. That'll play here on Friday night. It's a bit more religious than most people will be used to, but it is also political because we do talk about politics and we talk about Posey Parker and we talk about that aspect of the political life as well. But maybe I'll find a little short clip and play that here tomorrow night to give you guys a bit of a toaster. Other than that, thanks, team. We'll catch you tomorrow night from 9 p.m. Be safe, be well, and we're out. Hooroo.